Good morning, everyone. Well, thank you all for joining us. I know people are still filtering in, but I will just kind of start our welcome portion of our meeting. So you may have received a little pop-up that says this meeting is being recorded. And so I just want to reiterate that, yes, we are recording this meeting. You will not show up on camera in this meeting unless you take yourself off mute to speak. So please share your video if you can, but you're welcome to turn it off if you're feeling camera shy today. But we do love seeing people's faces and trying to recreate a community environment in this virtual space. And again, this meeting is being recorded, but you won't show up on the video unless you are speaking. I also just wanted to walk through, we do have closed captioning capability. So in the bottom of your Zoom program, you should see a little button that says more. Let me see. Oh, I'm not seeing the captioning ability. Is that active for this meeting?
I believe Allison, as the host, will have to either set that up or transfer Zoom host privileges to me, and I'll set that up. Thanks, Lena.
Yeah. Okay, as we're working on that, in order to get that closed captioning, once that is set up, you'll just click the More button and then click the button that says CC for closed captioning, and then you should be able to. Sorry, there's a lot going on in the back end, but you should be able to see a button that says closed captioning once that is enabled, if that helps you. And then we just ask that folks be muted if you're not speaking, just to eliminate background noises and distractions, and allowing us to better hear who is speaking and the information being shared. And it also helps the closed captioning be a little bit more accurate. And I will say at the end of the meeting, we have reserved time for people to share member updates. So as we're going through the meeting, feel free to think about if there are member updates that you would like to share and reserve those for the end of the meeting. Great. Well, that said, I think we can get started. I do have the privilege of being able to kind of MC this meeting today. Future meetings may be others. So I apologize if I'm not as graceful as the person who previously did this, which was Jason. Yeah, so at the beginning of every meeting, we do like to do a reading of our mission statement. So Sasha, can you go to the next slide? Thank you. We do like to have a participant from the audience read our mission statement. So does anybody want to bravely volunteer to read it out?
We mobilize our community to challenge systemic causes of homelessness and advocate for housing justice.
Thank you so much, Denise, for sharing that out, or for reading that statement. I do also want to read out our vision and value statement. It really frames the work that we do. So our vision is a region that acts on a shared sense of responsibility to ensure that everyone has a home. And the values that guide our work are equity, justice, and collective action. We've defined equity as centering race in the fight for housing justice, as white supremacy and structural racism cause disparities in who experiences homelessness. We define justice as upholding the dignity and civil rights of people experiencing homelessness and housing insecurity, and collective action as collaborating, uniting, and acting to build power. So for the next section, I do want to do a number of acknowledgements. And this is something new that we haven't done before, but I thought that because June is a really landmark month for so many people, it would be a good thing to take some moments to do some acknowledgements. And so I will say that a lot of this was originally written by Caroline Lopez from the Washington Low Income Housing Alliance and the Resident Action Project. And so I have added my own words to make it meaningful to me. And so I just wanted to throw credit where credit is due. And this was originally, much of these words were originally written by Caroline Lopez. As I'm kind of doing these acknowledgements, I do invite you all to reflect upon where you are, whose lands you reside upon, the lands where your ancestors and family came from, and the historical and ongoing factors that have brought you to this space. We'll drop into the link a chat. We'll drop into the chat a link for you to find out if you don't know. And I do invite you to share with others if there's anything that you have discovered. And so I want to first begin with a land acknowledgement. I'm just going to take a deep breath. We acknowledge that we are on stolen Indigenous land that was colonized by people who committed acts of thievery, genocide, family separation, and the stripping of Indigenous culture. Even now, Native and Indigenous people of this land are experiencing the deep loss of elders due to the pandemic, which was made exponentially worse by white supremacy and the systems of oppression that are alive and well today. I am joining you. I'm here on the land of the Coast Salish, Stillaguamish, Duwamish, and Suquamish people. I'm Filipino American, so my family came here to pursue opportunities after being dispossessed of their Indigenous lands and cultures through generations of European and American colonialism. At the same time, I do recognize my family's presence on these lands was by choice and is a deep privilege. I say all of this because as advocates for housing justice, it is important that we acknowledge settler colonialism is an ongoing process, and we're living in environments where the Indigenous peoples of Turtle Island have been forever displaced. I also would like to do some labor acknowledgements. So I want to acknowledge that people from the continent of Africa were kidnapped, brutally treated, and sold into slavery on this land. This nation was built on the backs of the Indigenous people from Africa and generations of their descendants. We're approaching Juneteenth this Saturday, which is a time of celebration and the anniversary by which slavery officially ended in this country. Yet still, we must acknowledge that generations of Black Americans are yet to receive reparations for their work, generational trauma, and continued violence and oppression. We also acknowledge that we've benefited from non-dominant cultures and communities, even in the pandemic, turning to the work that has been passed down from ancestors who have died and who are alive today, especially Black women organizers who are showing us what community care looks like. We can honor them by doing the work of racial justice and equity personally and through our work to change systems. I also want to acknowledge we're in the middle of June, which for many queer and trans people, including myself, is Pride Month. We acknowledge not only the violence against Black, Indigenous, Latinx people and people of color, but also the violence against queer and transgender people of color, many of whom have led and continue to lead the work for race and gender liberation. We acknowledge that the work of housing justice is directly linked to racial and gender justice, and that people impacted by homelessness and housing insecurity experience multiple systems of oppression. And I do want to kind of bring this full circle back to the beginning of these acknowledgements. I am Filipino American. Filipino American organizers have a term of solidarity, and it's isang bagsak, and that means if one falls, we all fall. It can also mean we rise and we fall together. It can also mean my liberation is tied to your liberation. And I just want to acknowledge that I hope to work with all of you to find justice and liberation so that we all may rise together. thank you for taking the time to listen to those acknowledgements.
Thank you very much, Selena. I want to thank you and also thank Caroline Lopez. I don't know if Caroline is joining us today, but thank her for the work that she did that you drew upon and built upon. And I want to acknowledge also for our members and participants here today that we're overdue to have land acknowledgement, labor acknowledgement integrated into our meetings. And so what we would like to do is to invite you, our members and coalition participants, in joining us to learn about meaningful ways to craft land and labor acknowledgements that resonate for our community, for where we are geographically, for where we are in our history, in our work, and to share with us things that have struck you as meaningful ways to offer these acknowledgements. That could take the form of spoken or written words that you or someone else has developed. It could take the form of a poem or of imagery or even of music. And we'd really like to draw on what you have either developed or experienced that could be useful and meaningful opportunity for us to either invite you to share that in upcoming meetings or to integrate them into something that we might use in a more standardized way. So as we begin that process, I really want to warmly invite you to share with us. There are a number of people joining us today who have crafted their own words of acknowledgement and recognition. And so we'd really appreciate it if you would share those with us. Thank you, Patricia. So as we move on, I want to say that, we also recognize that there are ways in which, although we have just seen rapid change take place in a small and we hope meaningful way by the creation of Juneteenth as a national holiday. We also want to make sure that when we are making these acknowledgements, we're tying them to action. And that's a huge part of what the coalition exists to do. We're going to move into the next portion of our agenda, which is the second of at least 3 parts of highlights from our most recent legislative session. And as coalition members know, the most recent legislative session, which was conducted entirely virtually, was an extraordinary, I would say, watershed of years worth of organizing and seizing the crisis of the COVID-19 pandemic and the crisis of where we are in terms of our economy, in terms of racial justice, and in terms of police accountability or the lack thereof, to move forward some remarkable pieces of our long-standing legislative agenda. Not everything, and not in necessarily the fullest way that we still need to see things adjust, but there have been some really significant changes. Last month, if you were able to join us at our May meeting, which was also our annual membership meeting, we were joined by State Representative Tara Simmons, State Representative Nicole Macri, and State Senator Patty Kuderer to review some of the extraordinary and significant gains in terms of tenant protections, housing and homelessness, investments, enormous shifts, including the passage finally of the Voting Rights Restoration Act, which you'll hear a little bit more about when Selena talks about voter registration and voting rights later on. And we also acknowledged at the time that even though we dedicated the better part of an hour to that remarkable litany of successes and the implementation, we didn't cover everything by a long shot. So we're especially delighted to have two guests with us today. One is Representative Strom Peterson, who represents the 21st Legislative District. Welcome, Representative Peterson. And we may, thank you for turning your camera on. We may highlight you in a moment here. And then after Representative Peterson, we're really delighted to be joined by Omar Cuevas Vega from Poverty Action. The Statewide Poverty Action Network, as you all know, is a statewide organization with which we often partner, and they are longtime advocates on public benefits. And there are some significant changes and improvements to public benefits that we want to make sure everyone here is aware of. And Sarah Robbins, our special projects manager, is going to talk a little bit about that with Omar. And then we're also going to take action. We know that June is too soon. Currently, the statewide eviction moratorium is scheduled to end in a matter of 13 days on June 30th. And the good work that all of you have done and are doing, the good work that lawmakers, including Representative Peterson, led on, has not had a chance to be implemented yet. And we simply cannot allow the eviction moratorium to expire without people having access to the eviction prevention tools, the rent assistance, and the legal representation that are such extraordinary and necessary victories in our attempts to prevent mass homelessness and housing instability. So we're going to take a little bit of time to invite all of you to join us with tools developed by our friends at the Washington Low-Income Housing Alliance to make a friendly phone call to Governor Inslee to let him know that June is too soon and we need him to extend the eviction moratorium. We're asking for it to be extended through December. We know that the implementation work is going to take months, although people are already working hard, and we'll pause and have some time for you to hear a little bit more about that. But first, welcome, Representative Peterson. Thank you so much for your strong leadership. Because the session was virtual, I think that a number of people, including myself, had more of an opportunity to hear legislators like you speak and to really feel warmed by the fact that the advocacy that we do is sometimes matched on the floor of the House and the Senate by the passionate advocacy of lawmakers who are trying to create a legislative environment in which we can do our work for housing justice. And in inviting you here, we of course wanted to ask you to focus on House Bill 1220, which we invited our members to advocate on throughout the entire legislative session, to hear from you about House Bill 1220 and also about implementation. But I also want to invite you to speak about other bills that you worked on that of course were extremely important to us and the people that our folks serve, and to share any thoughts you might have about plans for the upcoming next session. So I'll invite you to talk with us for about 6 or 7 minutes, and we'll see if people have specific questions for you, and I'll happily follow the chat and facilitate that. And we want to really thank you deeply for ensuring that this legislation, which requires all jurisdictions in our state to plan for the need for shelter and affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness, along with everyone else, is passed. And thank you so much. And thank you, of course, to FutureWise for working on the outside to lead on this legislation with you. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Allison. And thank you, Selena, for those fabulous opening remarks and acknowledgements. And that, is really kind of the basis of the work that we did this legislative session, both kind of more broadly, as Allison pointed out, which this was a historic legislative session. And we did it all with these little weird halos behind us that are horrible and annoying, but somehow we got the work done. And it was in no small part, well, to some of the folks that you listened to last month, Representatives Macri and Simmons, and of course, Senator Cooter and so many other incredible legislators that we have representing, all over the state. I think I'm just saying this kind of goes again back to the acknowledgement of the people that you are fighting to represent, are also the people that are representing all of us. We have the most diverse caucus ever in the history of Washington state. We have more members of color. We're a majority women's caucus in the House Democratic Caucus. And I think the proof shows, right? This is what happens when you get diverse people showing up and sharing their stories and sharing their voices and their leadership to really, people that kind of look like me. It's like, yeah, I'm more than happy to play a role and do whatever I can, but it's really the voices of so many of these people with their lived experiences that make this work possible. And from housing, you heard a lot about the housing bills last month, to the racial justice work, to climate change. I'm just incredibly proud of the work we did. And of course, big thanks to leadership in both the House and the Senate for the willingness to take that risk in a virtual session. We quite simply had discussions early on. Is this a session where we just kind of limp along and we don't do a lot because we're living in this new real weird world with some unsure, unsteady budget concerns? And then I think, as somebody pointed out, we had to, I'd say, take advantage of this pandemic, but this pandemic was so blatantly, I mean, just exposed everything that we all as advocates know has been there, but it so exposed it that we knew we had to do whatever we could. And on any number of issues, we did incredible work. And I don't like talking about my bills, but also incredibly proud of House Bill 1220 and the work that, and Allison, thank you for recognizing FutureWise, the work that FutureWise put in crafting that bill, bringing it to me, working with me, and especially Representative Macri to get this through. And it was tough at times. But I've quoted Representative Macri in the past. I'll quote her again, where really the impetus of this bill is people should be able to live where people are able to live. And I always like to let that sit for a second, because this is our history as Washington State, as a country where we simply have not allowed people to live where other people are allowed to live. And of course, when you look at when you look at redlining and the incredible racial disparities that are still alive and kicking in really every community, probably across the country, when it comes to the segregation of our cities and towns. And now even more exposed is that segregation when it comes to people that are facing homelessness, people that might be facing a mental health crisis, people that are facing addiction, transgender youth that might be kicked out of their homes. We need to make sure that these folks that need the most basic thing, a place to lay their head, a place to be safe, can do that in any spot in the cities in which we live. And this is, I think, I got an email a couple of days from Allison, and this has certainly been happening in my communities recently, when they're dealing with housing action plans, that people show up at city council meetings and say some pretty horrible things about a possible shelter or a possible home for that might be able to house 6 men with substance use disorder. And of course, the stories that they bring are never based in fact, but are based in fear. And so that's why we decided we needed to take action at a state level. I served on the Edmond City Council, and I know the pressures when you're on the city council. It's when it comes to these housing and zoning issues, the voices are very loud and very persistent. And so it was time we felt to take state action to give those cities and a lot of city councils that want to take this action but don't feel they have the political capital to do it. Well, we've given them an opportunity. But that doesn't mean that we just get to walk away. I think, action, as Allison said, is the next step. So we still need to, as advocates, talk to our local city councils, educate city council members and other members of the community about what this type of zoning actually means. That it's really about taking care of our neighbors. It's really about taking care of everybody and creating communities that are inclusive, communities that are loving, communities that will really tackle some of the issues that are terrifying, the issues of tent encampments, the issues of homelessness, the issues of mental crises. Yes, these are terrifying, but we have solutions, and that's getting people into housing and getting people into housing where they feel a part of the community. And that's what this kind of bill was based on. Again, looking at making cities look at and kind of acknowledge our long history of redlining, of racial disparities when it comes to housing. We need to look back. We need to learn from our history. But more than that, or more to it than that, is moving forward, we need to put that same lens when it comes to creating housing for everybody. No matter whether it's developmental disabilities or physical disabilities, or again, a mental health crisis or a substance use disorder, or just somebody who's homeless because, their car broke down and they lost their job and they don't have a place to live. It could be as simple or as complex as anybody who's living next door to us right now. And that's what it was about. So yeah, I think, moving forward to make sure that this is implemented is still putting pressure on our city councils, putting pressure on, and maybe not even pressure, but educating, well, maybe pressure, depending on what city you live in. But really trying to, and working as you do, working with the Poverty Action Network and so many of these other organizations and organizations that know about building housing and creative housing, and working with everybody to find opportunities, and knowing that at least one or two of the hurdles are at least lowered a little bit when it comes to the zoning. They're not going to go away. This is a long fight.
Yes.
But hopefully this is a good step, along with, as I said, the incredible amount of other work that was done with rental assistance. And thank you. In conclusion, I will stand for questions, but thank you for your action in contacting the governor's office. I will be getting off this call and having a call with a number of my colleagues to work on messaging, because just as an example, in Snohomish County, they have about 10,000 applications for rental assistance. They've been able to go through about 1,500 of them. So there are just thousands and thousands of people that need rental assistance that we just haven't had the time to just go through their application process.
Right.
Yeah. So there's a lot of work to be done there.
Thank you so much. We know that here in King County, sadly, the same is true. While we are incredibly grateful for not only the state resources, of course, the federal resources, and the rapid work by community-based organizations as well as local government, it's still a time and labor intensive process to apply for, review, and get the money out the door. And for that reason alone, although there are many other reasons, it's just not realistic. So we look forward to hearing anything you might want to share after you and your colleagues have met later this morning about effective advocacy. I wonder if I could just ask you, Representative Peterson, when we were doing training and education and advocacy alerts with our members and community members about House Bill 1220, a little bit tongue in cheek, but a little bit seriously, what we said is, this is about land use and planning and using the Growth Management Act. And if your eyes are glazing over because those things seem boring to you, don't do that, because this is actually really important. So I wonder if you could briefly describe what you think the for a lay person who doesn't spend time looking at land use, what it is that House Bill 1220 actually does. And then also to speak to, of course, we know this is not magic, this is not the full transformation, but what are the implications in communities that may have already passed restrictive zoning related to shelters and supportive housing?
Sure. And, full disclosure, start getting down that land use avenue and my eyes can glaze over occasionally too, because it is complicated, dry, kind of tasteless stuff a lot of the times, but every once in a while, it can be used for good and it can be used for evil. And what we've discovered is that basically cities would pass zoning regulations, which we're kind of all familiar with. You live in a neighborhood, you can't build your fence more than 6 feet high, or you can't, build your house right next to somebody's house, or that a building can only be, 3 stories tall, or whatever it is. There are lots of zoning and lots of things that are great with zoning. They protect wetlands and they protect the environment. And but what cities have been doing in listening to kind of the loud voices of NIMBYism is using that zoning as exclusionary practice. So basically saying, you can have a single family home in this neighborhood, but you can't use that single family home for housing trans youth that have been kicked out of their homes. They don't get that specific, but they do different things like, the people that live in the home need to all be related, or the people that live in that home, you can't, that's a business, so you can't use that as a home. So there are very subtle ways that they do that kind of in specific instances, and that in broader instances, they will just flat out, as happened recently, is they will zone out opportunities for larger shelters or larger housing opportunities for folks, and just say, well, it can't be in a neighborhood that has X, Y, and Z, or a part of the town that has, it can't be too close to a school, because God forbid we have people that live too close to a school. And they'll create so many zoning impediments that they can't be located anywhere in their city. And then they just try to say, then it's the next city's problem. So that's kind of how zoning has been used in these instances when it comes to housing people, again, that need housing, trying to give people an opportunity to live where people are allowed to live. And I think the other big example that I like to use is that we fought for and finally got through is, if a city can zone for a hotel or motel where somebody driving through town that has a few bucks in their pocket can stop and lay their head, how can they zone out an emergency shelter or some other type of shelter where somebody driving through town that doesn't have any money needs a place to lay their head? And that's really, what it boils down to, is that kind of haves versus have-nots, and people need a place to rest. And whether you have $100 to spend at a hotel or you don't have any, you should still be allowed to stop in that city and find a safe place to stay. That's not in your car, that's not in a tent, that's not under a bridge. So probably a longer answer than you needed, but.
No, I thank you very much. I think that's a really accessible, clear set of examples and explanation of why this matters. It does seem so commonsensical, but indeed we have, a long history of redlining in pretty much every community in King County and across this country. And maybe we need to think of a better phrase than inclusive zoning to counter redlining. But I think what we're seeing in King County in particular is this has come front and center as we have worked to say, yes, homelessness is a regional crisis and it requires regional solutions. And what that means is every one of the 39 jurisdictions in King County needs to allow for and plan for people who may need to live in something that is not a traditional single family home with a white picket fence. And, you know, this of course is playing out in many ways in many different communities. I mentioned to you in my message earlier that I'd been at both Burien and Federal Way City Councils just this week. And, you know, there is a subtext of who gets to live where and whether or not certain people are considered part of a community or indeed actually human. Could you give us just a brief insight into what you think the implementation and the education around 1220 could look like?
Yeah, I wish I had a better answer for that, even though you prime me with this question, because it is going to vary so much from city to city. Just in the last few days in my district, in the city of Mukilteo, the city council passed a very watered down housing action plan, despite a fair number of progressives on the city council. But again, they were overwhelmed with fear, and this also dealt with issues around accessory dwelling units, and you know, it wasn't just about shelters, but it's the same chorus that shows up. If you think about changing the zoning when it comes to housing, that suddenly, you know, oh, our small town is going to end up looking like X, pick your, you know, whatever. Same that happens in Edmonds. So part of it on the education is and other legislation that we still need to work on, is really showing to city councils that, and you know, and planning departments and city attorneys and you know, all of those folks that work behind the scenes, just exactly what that law is and what this means when it comes to implementation. So you know, those of you who might know people in city government or work in city government, that's going to be part of the implementation process. Trying to speed it up is really almost getting to the kind of the bureaucratic side of city government, talking to the planners and to really show them, you know, here's the law, here's, you know, how it is supposed to be implemented. I'm not sure if we're going to face legal challenges. Who knows what's going to happen? But now that it's passed and signed, we think it's pretty tight. So
Great.
yeah, so the implementation is just going to vary so much from city to city. But I'm hoping that so many, you know, and again, this is, you know, elections matter, and these odd year elections, we got a whole bunch of them coming up with city councils and county councils, is to get folks that are open to these conversations and won't just, because we'll still find cities that will still refuse to pass inclusive zoning, even if it's the law of the land, and they'll just wait for a lawsuit, and they'll wait for us to spend a bunch of time and a bunch of money. So some of it is going to find cities that are more receptive and to show that implementation can happen, and that it's not, the sky does not fall, and you know, people get housed, and we start making an impact on what we're all here to make an impact for. That's getting people housed.
Yes. Thank you so much. I have a few ideas that we'll probably follow up with you and our friends at FutureWise about, because maybe we want to invite the planners to come hear from you and your fellow lawmakers about this, and we can contribute to some regional education I know that you have this very important meeting about the eviction moratorium to attend. I want to thank you so much for your work, for taking the time to be with us. We know that you and other lawmakers are trying to do your day jobs and take a little break. But we're most grateful to you for your work and for joining us this morning, and hope that you'll come back another time.
Thank you so much. I just thought of one more brief thing is I was kind of talking about the history of redlining and the racial disparities and the future of how zoning is still creating disparities. Those are still so, as I think Selena said in her acknowledgements, those are still so, if they're not based on race necessarily, they still have the same racial disproportionate outcomes as if we were just doing old-fashioned redlining, where it's just like, hey, some of the language that's used in those old redlining things. Oh, Ethiopians can't live here, or like this horrible language that we also worked on some bills thanks to Representative Valdez. So we're still dealing with that incredible disproportional impact on communities of color. And this is just another way to do that. So just wanted to acknowledge that, yeah, that's still a huge hill that we've got to climb when it comes to that. So thank you again for that opening, and thank you all just for the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Representative Peterson. That was really an important way to tie different parts of our work together. And I think we all know that some of that language persists in local agreements and is in the process of being stripped out. And there are a number of local organizations that are working to try to correct that. I want to turn things over now to Selena, to Omar, to Sarah regarding important changes to public benefits programs. And Omar, there you are. Hello, thank you. And I apologize for running a little over, but I hope that folks agreed it was useful to hear from Representative Peterson, and I will stop talking now and turn things over to you, Selena.
Yeah, actually, I believe Sarah's leading this section, but I'll just, we can actually just kick it straight over to Omar, unless, Sarah, you had things that you would like to add. But I know that this past legislative session, there were many changes to public benefits programs, and we want to make sure that you have the information that you need about these changes to help you serve the people you serve. I'm sure there's a more articulate way to put that, but yeah, Sarah, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I was going to just introduce this part of our agenda. So we always try after each legislative session, we invite Poverty Action, who's one of our amazing partners working on public benefits and other basic needs, to talk about, what happened this session, what do all of our members need to know about changes to public benefits. And sometimes that conversation is a tearful conversation because we are fighting, cuts to programs. And this year we have, some great wins to talk about. So Omar, the policy and field coordinator from Statewide Poverty Action Network, is here to talk to us about some of those great changes. Welcome, Omar.
Hey, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here. It's always a great joy to come and present to this wonderful group. Both Allison, Selena, and Sarah took the words right out of my mouth, introducing who Poverty Action is. So I'm just going to go ahead and kick it off and start talking about some of the amazing wins that we had during this legislative session. There was quite a few, so we're really proud, especially because around this time last year, we didn't know what was going to be happening or where the state was headed based off the start of the pandemic. Next slide, please. So the first one I want to start with is temporary assistance for needy families. This is one of the biggest programs that we work on. So one of the biggest wins that we had come out of legislative session was that we were able to secure a 50% cash grant increase, which will start at the beginning of July of this year, which puts us almost equivalent to pre-recession cash grant levels. As I've mentioned before, and if you've been to some of my previous presentations, I've mentioned how back during the Great Recession, the state legislature made some significant cuts to the TANF program to save money. And even to this day, almost a decade later, we're still working to undo some of those changes. So with this modest cash grant increase, we were able to bring it back up to pre-recession levels, and hopefully we'll continue to advocate to bring it forward. There's actually another bill that was passed that will hopefully get that cash grant increase to go up even higher. Another one was we were able to extend some of the COVID protections, granting time limit extensions for hardship all the way through the next fiscal year, so through July 1st of 2022. So those are some, if families are facing any potential hardships, they're able to get beyond the 60-month time limit. Unfortunately, some of the protections that were made during COVID, so some of the workforce participation and in-person meetings will likely start to end or ramp down either a month after the state of emergency is lifted. So currently it's projected to be June 30th, well, the end of this month. So likely in either July or most likely September. So some of those things will start to end by September of this year. And families will be receiving letters pretty soon, kind of letting them know about kind of going back on some of those changes. Another bill that was passed, and this was sponsored by Senator Wynn in the 34th Legislative District, was tying some of these time limit extensions to when the average state unemployment rate is about 7% or higher. This will be instituted in July 1st of 2023. We see this as a work in progress. We know that there's many reasons why folks end up stopping looking for employment for a number of barriers. We wanted this to be tied a little bit more towards sort of some racial equity analysis, but this is a great start, and we're hoping to continue working with the state legislature to increase some of those time limit extensions for families. Next slide, please. In regards to the age, blind, and disabled program, one of the things that we were highly advocating was no cuts to the program, and no cuts were made. One of the really interesting things that we were able to pass this year, and this was a bill that was sponsored by Representative Marie Levitt from the 28th Legislative District, is updating the standard of need. This is a tool that is used to calculate cash benefits. It has been in place for close to 30 years, and since it was first instituted, it hasn't been updated. So currently, it will be going through some significant updates, and hopefully by July 1st, we'll know how a new standard of need will be utilized. And so hopefully this will set the stage for a cash grant increase across almost all cash assistance programs. So the Age, Blind, and Disabled program, TANF, the Pregnant Women's Assistance, and the Refugee Cash Assistance program. The bill also did a couple of other additional things. It additionally provides transitional food assistance for families who are exiting SNAP. It provided funding for the Disaster Cash Assistance Program, which I'll talk a little bit more later. And then, of course, it modernizes the standard of need, which definitely needs to be updated for sure. Next slide, please. For housing and essential needs, we were able to secure a 27 million increase. So hopefully this will help shrink the wait list and get folks housed faster. We know that in many of our counties, there's a really long wait list and folks are stuck waiting to receive this modest cash assistance program as they're waiting to go on to federal benefits. So hopefully with this 27 million across the next 2 years will help shrink the wait list. Next slide, please. And so as I mentioned, the Disaster Cash Assistance Program was a program that was created back in April for folks who either didn't qualify for many of the cash assistance programs or had phased out of the program. So this created a modest cash assistance. I believe 25 million was allocated back in April. Unfortunately, the money did run out on June 3rd. But we were able to secure additional funding, and the program opened at the beginning of this week. And so it's going to run for 2 additional weeks and will expire on June 30th. So if you have any program participants, clients, residents who were in the process of applying for DCAP, encourage them to reach back out as new additional funding has been allocated. Next slide, please. And then finally, you know, as many of folks heard, when the American Rescue Plan Act of 2021 was rolled out, a lot of states received some much needed funding to address pandemic related things. Some of those included developing a pandemic emergency assistance fund. There are no specifics yet from DSHS, but slowly they will be rolling out some of their rules and regulations and how the program essentially will work. But other things that came from this, from the American Rescue Plan Act is the pandemic EBT program has been made available through the end of this summer, as well as having a SNAP increase that also will be going all the way through September. And so both of those programs have had, there's additional funding for parity between the pandemic EBT and then the regular SNAP increase, which we're pretty excited about. And then lastly, what one of the things that the advocates have been asking for a really, really long time is the extension of the child tax credit. This is pretty exciting. Because there have been made some significant changes to the program to include more funding for the program. It rolls out as monthly cash benefits from July of this year through December, and then they'll get a supplemental tax credit in 2022. I'll drop a link in the chat in just a little bit so that folks can read more about it. But additionally, for families that don't file taxes because they don't make enough money or no money at all, it allows them to be able to file for this tax credit. And I encourage you all, if you work with families, to encourage them to sign up and so they can begin to get this tax credit. The tax credit does vary by family size. So it's a little bit hard to estimate how much the family will receive. And it also varies by the age of children. But we're pretty excited, and it also extends the age that the qualifying children are eligible for, and it goes up to age 17 and above. So we're pretty excited about some of those changes because it's definitely going to be a big boost in poverty, a big boost for families who are living in poverty. Yes, it actually, one of the other changes was that mixed status families are also able to apply. Previously, it was only in households where everyone had a social security number. Now it includes mixed status families. So I'm gonna go ahead and drop a link into the chat real quick so you can read more about the tax credit. And I will also drop in a link for families who either do not make enough money to file their taxes to be able to submit their information so that the IRS and the revenue program will be able to get to them their tax credit. Next slide, please. Great. Definitely, if folks have other questions, I'm happy to answer any questions. I do have my contact information in the next slide. So if folks want to reach out separately with any other questions, feel free to do so. You can also, that's my email above. You can also reach out to Marcy Bowers, who is our executive director. Currently, our basic needs campaign manager is out on parental leave, but she'll be coming back later this fall. So in the meantime, feel free to reach out to Marcy or myself with any questions. Of course, you can always sign up for our newsletter to be up to date on the work that we're doing around basic needs or some of our 5 other campaigns, as well as follow us on social media. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Omar. That was some good news. More good news coming out of this session. I think we have a couple of minutes if anyone has any sort of quick questions for Omar or around public benefits from this session. I did drop a note in the chat that we will be covering the child tax credit in more depth at our July meeting. More information about what that means for families that you're working with and how they can access the tax credit if they have not filed taxes and what advocacy you can do. Any questions? Oh, Allison, did you have a question?
Yes, I was trying to wait to see if anybody else does, but just two things that struck me as I listened to both of you, and I saw Terry put a comment in that 15% increase for TANF is so very modest, which of course we want to say out loud, even though we celebrate it and it's good and people need it, it's really quite modest. So I wonder if, Omar, you could give us a little bit of historical context about what that brings the TANF benefit up to on average compared to where it used to be. And then also, Sarah, if you could perhaps briefly talk about DCAP, just what we know about the disaster cash assistance program now.
So I'll go first. So it's a little bit difficult to calculate how much the current increase will be in regards to actual dollar amount. We've been estimating that for a family of 3, it would be about $83 an additional increase, which, you know, as we've all said, like it's very modest. Like we know that it's not enough to fit the need that is currently happening in our state with the high cost of living and the high cost of basically everything, including childcare. I did see a comment come in regards to childcare. But yeah, it really depends on the family size, unit, and the age of children. But yeah, for a family of 3, we've been saying it's about $83, but it's going to vary.
Does that bring the TANF benefit back to the level that it was at before the 2008 cuts?
Yes, yes, it does. I do see some questions about childcare. Unfortunately, I am not knowledgeable about the childcare program or Working Connections childcare, but I'm happy to follow up with some folks and happy to share some information. Also, feel free to reach out via email, and I'm happy to connect it to the right folks about information regarding childcare. I know there's a lot of other wonderful advocates who are in the realm of early learning and childcare as well.
Great. So a little bit about the disaster cash assistance program. So this is a program that currently has a limited amount of funding for a monthly cash grant for those that are essentially you can't qualify for any other DSHS cash benefit. And your income has to be low enough that you would income qualify for another cash benefit. So you can't be on ABD or TANF or Social Security. And the monthly cash benefit is around, for an individual, is about $339 or $336 a month. Right, it's a benefit, while it's a monthly benefit, the way it's structured is you have to reapply every month, and it's dependent on how much money the state has allocated to the fund. And currently, my understanding is right now there's enough money for applications for this month, but I don't think there is extended funding that we know of beyond this month. That could change, and we will definitely keep folks updated through our communications and through this meeting space. Thanks. Great. Well, thank you so much, Omar. We really appreciate you being here and all the work that Poverty Action is doing. I am going to now turn it over to, I believe, is it Selena? Is it you?
Yeah, sorry,
Great.
I will. I'm gonna start sharing my screen. Yeah, so I just wanted to give you all some information about some of the voter registration and voting rights work that we do and our plans for this year. Of course, many of you are aware that the Coalition on Homelessness is deeply invested in protecting the civil rights of people experiencing homelessness, as well as people impacted by the criminal legal system. And so one of the things that we do is voter registration work and sharing information about voting rights for people experiencing homelessness or those impacted by the criminal legal system to help protect our democracy and make sure that everyone's voice is heard. And so I'm just going to kind of walk you through, forecast for you the election that is coming up, and then talk about changes to voting rights, give you tips on filling out a voter registration form, and then I'll also, I really want to hear from all of you about like if you've done the voter registration like at your organization, what has worked best and what are some lessons learned. And if it's something that you're interested in incorporating into the services you offer but haven't yet, I want to also hear about what your needs are and what the barriers you're facing are, and if there are any resources that you need. I just do want to note that we do have some scheduled voter registration trainings, and so I'm going to gloss over some things, but we'll go through some of this information in depth at some upcoming trainings in about 2 weeks. So the first one is Tuesday, June 29th, 5:30 to 7 p.m. And then Thursday, July 1st, 12 to 1:30 p.m. I believe I can't see the chat, but if somebody could drop the registration link to that, that would be wonderful. And so these trainings are geared for if you're a service provider at a community site that either needs a refresher on some of this information or you just kind of want to know what the process is like, please come to these trainings. And if you're a community member joining the call and you're interested in volunteering with the coalition, please join that meeting. We're happy to talk you through the process, and typically what we do is match you to a community site, and then you can help people experiencing homelessness register to vote. So please join me at those meetings, and again, I'll cover some more information in depth at those meetings. And I do just want to forecast for you that we have a summer primary. So it's the August 3rd primary election. And I just want to give you some information about timeline, just because it feels like it's far away, but it's also just around the corner. And so, and this deadline, these deadlines and this information also is really helpful in terms of understanding what work needs to be done when. And so I mean, just generally in July, the vote pamphlets will be mailed. So it'll have information about what's on the ballot, who's, you know, candidates for the primary, and other things that are going to appear on the primary ballot. In mid-July, ballots will be mailed, and ballot drop boxes around King County will open. And then if in terms of the deadline for getting folks registered to vote, the deadline is Monday, July 26th. That is the deadline to register to vote online or by mail. And something to note is that that is actually when King County Elections needs to receive it. So you can't put it in the mail on that date. It has to be mailed the week before. So very important, something to keep in mind. That said, for all of our elections, you can register up to and on the election date. So people can register up to and on August 3rd, which is the primary election day. And you just need to go to either King County Elections Center, which is in Renton, or on July 31st, there will be vote centers around King County that will open. So you can get folks there and they can still register and get their ballot and vote in the election. So just helpful information as you're thinking about some of the voter registration work. And I do just want to go over eligibility requirements for registering people to vote. I think we say this a lot, but I think there's always a lot of misinformation, especially because we have mail-in voting system, but you don't need a house to vote. So you just need to be a US citizen, be 18 or older on election day. That says Tuesday, November 3rd. I apologize, I did not update the slide. It should say August 3rd. And you've had to have lived in Washington for 30 days and not currently under Department of Corrections supervision for a Washington state felony conviction. I am gonna, this will change shortly and I will cover that in just a minute, but broadly speaking for right now, for this year, these are the requirements. And so if you have folks that meet those eligibility requirements, I strongly encourage you to register them to vote so that their voice is heard in this election. And then again, just the different ways to register people to vote are online. So the King County election site and you can type in that that web address into a browser, and there's a way to complete that online by mail, which is how I believe most people are familiar with this. It's a voter registration form, and then in person at the King County Election Center in Renton, and then the vote centers that are opening on August 31st. I do highly recommend that you call King County Elections if you have any questions. They're extremely helpful, very nice. In our voter registration work that we did in fall, I'm pretty sure I called them once a day, added them to my phone. So it might be helpful if this is something that you plan to do. And then I just wanted to kind of walk you through, I mean, I know many of you know how to fill out a form, but I just want to highlight some of the things that come up when you're specifically registering people experiencing homelessness to vote. So I just kind of wanted to give you this example of this annotated form and kind of point out some specific things to note. And so, of course, the required information is name and date of birth. And then residential address. And so this is something that comes up a lot of times when registering people experiencing homelessness. What they would like to know is basically where people are most of the time. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a full address. It can also be an intersection or cross street. It can be the address of a park. It can be the address of a shelter that they frequent often. It could also be coordinates. It just needs to be identifiable on a map. And that residential address determines their voting precinct. And so it determines things like their legislative district and basically, I'm sure that there is a more eloquent way to put this, but it determines their voting precinct. And then the mailing address, this is really important. Of course, they don't have to be the same. This is where people will get mailed the ballot. And so always recommend if there's like a family member that they are on good terms with or a friend that they're on good terms with, that they can receive that mail, receive that ballot, you can put that down. Also, many different community mail programs, of course, is where a lot of people get some of their mail, as well as places like shelter or food banks or other community mail sites. And then, of course, there's you do need to fill out the qualifications. So that needs to be fully filled out in order for us to be able to turn in the form. And then the identification, I think this is another thing that comes up often. You need to have either the Washington license or ID number or the last 4 digits of someone's social security number. I think that is really important because many people often lose their identification documents, but many people have, the last 4 of their social security number memorized, and so that they can still vote if they don't have a register to vote if they don't have their ID card. And then of course a signature. I mean, I know many of you know how to fill out a form, but it is required. And if it's not filled out in completion, there will be issues. And so just make sure that they have signed it. And then also there's some not required information, but it's really helpful. Gender, email, and phone. So in case there are any issues that need to be resolved, it's really good to have that if they have it. And then, yeah, if they had any old info, putting that there is sometimes really helpful as well. Again, I'll cover a lot of this information in depth at those voter registration trainings, but I just wanted to give you some of this information just so that you are seeing it again, because that primary is coming up, and just to give you all a refresher in case this is information you've had previously, but you just need a little bit of a refresher. And then, yeah, of course, unfortunately, can't fill it out in like cool purple glittery gel pen. It does have to be a blue and black pen, and no pencils. And then if you are completing the form for someone, like say if they don't have glasses or something like that, you can help them complete it, but they must sign it. And then again, that distinction between residential address and mailing address is also really important. And yeah, and I just wanted to also talk about voting rights restoration. We are part of a broad statewide coalition called the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition. It is a coalition led by currently and formerly incarcerated people. And through their leadership, we worked and were able to pass House Bill 1078 in this past legislative session. And so it's a really, really incredible bill. What it means is that under current laws, and so this will apply for the upcoming elections this year in 2021, people who are on community custody or under the authority of the Department of Corrections for a felony conviction, currently they're not eligible. They're not eligible to vote. But beginning in 2022, this will change. So once it goes into effect, people on community custody will have their voting rights automatically restored. And so it's really, really big. We're in this sort of interim period between when that law is going to go into effect. And so we are collecting information on behalf of the Washington Voting Rights Restoration Coalition. And so if you serve people that have been directly impacted by the criminal legal system and would like to help us spread the word, please let us know. We really want to make sure that nobody is missed in the implementation of this bill. And so we want to get a good idea of where people are going and what are the communication strategies that work best to reach them, to make sure that they understand their voting rights and also feel empowered and want their voice to be heard. And I just wanted to open up for some, discussion from you all. I feel like we really love to hear from you all. And so I wanted to ask you all if you feel comfortable unmuting and sharing in this meeting. What are the biggest barriers that you have noticed in getting the folks you served registered to vote and voting? And also I want to understand, what are your resource needs? So in the past, many people have noted, we just need some information and voter registration forms, and then we can help the folks we serve register to vote. Others have noted they really want posters, brochures, flyers that they can hand out to folks. And then also some people are like, we don't have capacity and we really want coalition nonpartisan voter registration volunteers to come to our site and register people to vote in addition to the other services that that we offer. And so yeah, I just really want to hear from you all about what are those barriers. How can we help provide you with some resources, whether that's information or people power? And then finally, I also want to hear if you're an organization that already does this work, what are some lessons learned? Because I feel like we're not the experts in this, and we do want to hear from you all. So I will just stop talking and see if anybody wants to kind of provide any of this feedback. And I do also want to state, if you're not comfortable unmuting during a meeting, that's totally fine. There is a survey that is asking all of these questions, and I will follow up with you after you complete the survey as well. But I do really like to pass the microphone if possible. So, and I will also stop sharing so I can see your faces.
I will say that I know there are folks who are in this meeting right now who work at organizations that do voter registration or have partnered with us to make sure that your staff or volunteers have information. And while you may not be the exact right person or the person who's the point on that, we'd appreciate it if you'd give a heads up to us about who the right person in your organization is so Selena can connect. And so we can really use August and use the time between now and the August primary to experiment and figure out how we are going to continue to do this work during COVID's continued presence in our community, with an eye towards an even more robust voter registration and voting rights turnout in the fall, and really gearing up for this incredible change that's going to take effect January 1st. So this isn't a one and done situation. We now have the opportunity to do this work year round, and we're really excited to hear from you. Even if you're not the right person, point us in the right direction of the person at your program or agency, please.
I also do recognize that many people have Zoom and participation fatigue, and it's totally okay. And if you don't want to talk now, feel free to email me, and I'm happy to schedule a more one-on-one meeting if you would prefer to give feedback that way. But thank you, and please let me know if there's any other information that I can provide. Otherwise, I'm happy to move on to the next portion of our agenda.
Just have one tiny, hi, this is Karina.
Hi.
Just one tiny thing that has been a challenge is that because all of our guests get all their mail at the church, we don't get those voter information packets enough for everyone. Like they send one to the address.
Thank you, Karina. I'm going to jump on that because we had that issue come up. I don't know if anyone from Compass Housing Alliance is on this call, but of course, 77 South Washington Street, which is the Compass Client Services Office address that thousands of people use, had the same issue. They got 0 pamphlets. But guess what? The friendly, wonderful people at the King County Elections Office, 206-296-VOTE, will be happy to mail you, Karina, as many as you ask for. It's an easy fix, I believe.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Let us know if it doesn't work, and let us know if it does. The folks at King County Elections have really gone above and beyond. They've even worked with us to put a temporary ballot drop box at the Compass CSO. And they don't do that lightly. It's not a small thing to set it up and to empty it and secure it. But they really do understand that there are multiple barriers for people experiencing homelessness or who are unstably housed. And they really do want to hear from you. If you have a similar question to Karina's, they will be very responsive, I'm quite sure.
Thank you, Selena and Allison, and thank you for sharing the information for the trainings coming up. Again, that is, I believe, the 29th and July first, if you're interested, I am just popping in quickly to share information about the coalition's annual program, Project Cool for Back to School. Project Cool is a member benefit program for agencies who serve school-aged youth and children. There are two pieces to Project Cool. One is working with organizations to provide students with new backpacks, supplies, and books for the school year. And the second piece is the Helping Homeless Students 101 McKinney-Vento workshop, which we'll loop back to at a later time, and we hope to loop you all in to help us develop the content for that. Right now we're in the process of hoping to get your orders and connect with organizations who are serving school-aged youth to be able to provide the supplies. We're conducting Project Cool similarly to how we did in 2020, in which we are purchasing the supplies to be able to provide to students. We are looking at placing our order the week of July 5th for a delivery date in mid-August. And so if your organization does serve school-aged youth and you'd be interested in participating in Project Cool, I invite you to email us at projectcool@homelessinfo.org. We've reached out to the organizations who participated last year, and we've heard from a few, including Solid Ground Broadview, Multi-Service Center, Fusion, Federal Way, Adwas, Lehigh, Salvation Army. So those are a few who we're partnering with for this year, and we hope to connect with a few more. So again, that is projectcool@homelessinfo.org if you're interested in participating. Pass it to Allison.
Thank you, Sasha. I'm just going to jump in briefly here because I recognize that, you know, we say Project Cool, and some people have a long history and know that that is backpacks, school supplies, books, and hygiene items for school-age kids experiencing homelessness. And some people might not have heard what Project Cool is. Project Cool for Back to School really grew out of the work of family serving homeless service providers who were painfully aware that their kids were walking in the door of their classrooms without the same equipment that other kids had. And if you know your McKinney-Vento Act inside and out, which I bet a few of you do, you will know that among the things that schools are required to provide to their students experiencing homelessness are all the materials that they might need to access an education. But we also know that a large portion of that is an unfunded mandate. So that is why our work at the coalition has for years included rallying community members to do supply drives and to come together and fill backpacks in usually a dark basement somewhere. On occasion, we've used space at Lehigh. Thank you, Lehigh. We are now hosted at the Columbia City Church of Hope with great thanks to them. And we love those volunteer days and the opportunity to connect with people in the community. But this year, as last year, as Sasha explained, we're taking a different, more streamlined approach. So while we're really sad not to have the camaraderie and the opportunity for people to experience the literally hands-on pleasures of filling backpacks for about 1,200 school-age kids, we want to keep Project Cool going. We want those kids whom you are working with and serving to have the supplies that they need. And we need to hear from you in time to place an order, and we'll be glad again to work with whoever the right person is. So if it's not you, but you work at Wellspring, Nefertari, I'm looking at you, perhaps you can make the connection for Sasha with the right person. And if you work at an organization where you don't primarily serve families with school-age children, potentially a place like the Chief Seattle Club, but you do have some, please get in touch with us, because we always do want to make sure that we're providing these resources, even if it's just 2 or 3 kids who need them. So that's my little additional blurb. Thank you.
Sarah, I'll pass it on to you for Solidarity Fund.
Great. Yeah, thank you. So I am just going to talk very briefly about the Coalition's Solidarity Fund. So in the spring of 2020, the Coalition, as a response to the pandemic, raised some funds to grant out to organizations to support programming and direct services or bolster operations in response to, excuse me, COVID-19. We did a phase 1 of the granting at the end of in 2020, and we are now opening up phase 2 of the Solidarity Fund. So the application and information about the application is now up on our website. We are looking to grant out primarily grants of about between $1,000 and $5,000 to support the work that's happening and things that generally don't get covered by public funding, gaps where a gap that you see in your service coverage. We will consider applications over 5,000 on a case-by-case basis. So again, we will be sending out a larger communication, excuse me, today or tomorrow with information on who's what organizations are eligible, and a link to the application. You can also go to our website and it's on our homepage with all of the information. There is an email address, solidarity@homelessinfo.org, that you can send questions, and we will get back to you with any questions that you might have. So look forward to hearing more about great work that's happening at our partner organizations. Thanks.
And I think to close out the meeting, we wanted to, oh, I'm sorry. Let me pass it over to Sasha for one last thing on our agenda.
Thanks, Leah. Very quickly, the Coalition's values, of course, we have the value of collective action defined to us as to collaborate, unite, and act to build power. And while a lot of it is in the forefront and advocacy and you all coming together, this work couldn't be done for the Coalition without the behind the scenes administrative and operations work. And so to that, I wanted to take a moment to acknowledge and highlight the wonderful work of our operations director, Aline Listfeld, who is on our call, and to wish her well as her time with the Coalition comes to an end and as she moves to a role with King County. Aline has a superpower of incorporating an equity lens to the operational aspect of work, and comes with grace and humility and a lot of wonderful experiences from making mistakes and learning alongside people most impacted. For the Coalition, she strengthened our internal systems for communication, some of planning processes and flow. As my supervisor, she reminds me often to explore and think beyond the possibilities that are immediately in front of me with work and processes that I may be just used to and familiar with, and to always think beyond what I think I may be capable of. And of course, in addition, Aline does a lot of the back end work, which comes to financials, HR, tech assistance as we're working from home, and database work, which is the foundation of a lot of the work that we're able to do as a Coalition. So Aline, I just wanted to say thank you for your time at the Coalition. We are so excited for your next journey and for the work that you'll be doing with King County and how that'll make an impact in our community. And thank you for your contribution and gracing us with your presence. Back to you, Selena.
Thank you. I'm feeling verklempt. Thank you. That was very kind and generous. And it's been a true honor and an incredibly rewarding experience to be able to work alongside each and every one of you, and supporting the work of the Coalition and all of the member organizations that make what we do possible. So I look forward to staying connected with you all in a variety of different ways, and I will continue to be a supporter.
Thank you all so much for joining our meeting. I know that we are at time, but I do, I echo what Sasha says about Aline, and she's been such an incredible cheerleader for so many of us, and such a powerful advocate for equity and justice. And I don't even know what to say besides that. And so I do want to see if anybody has any Coalition member updates that they would like to share to close out this meeting. And if not, I hope you all have a wonderful, beautiful, sunny day.
So we can be able to just like share any kind of announcement updates really quickly. Is that what you're?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. This is Patricia, as I shared with you all. Today is going to be our monthly, I oversee the National Coalition to End Urban Indigenous Homelessness, and every third Thursday, same as this coalition, we have our monthly meetings for the Northwest Seattle King County region. That includes, you know, our founding organizations, Chief Seattle Club, Mother Nations, Seattle Indian Health Board, and United Indians of All Tribes, especially. We are very much inclusive to Indigenous identified communities that might not necessarily call this their Indigenous, you know, ancestral home, but want to be inclusive to that, as a lot of our values align, especially with our oceanic communities that call Seattle and the Northwest home. So those meetings go from 2:30 to 4 every third Thursday of the month. And so we're going to be discussing some really important things. Definitely, I don't know if any of you have seen recently that there's a huge response from our Native-led agencies in response to the new contract for the outreach for the city of Seattle, in which I definitely believe that our responses from our leadership made a huge impact in some of the changes that were made within the outreach contract. And so those are things that we're going to be continually discussing. We're also meeting with the Regional Homelessness Authority very soon. And so we're going to be discussing some of those priorities as we're establishing new relationships with the RHA, as well as now that I'm on the board for this coalition, talking more about what equity and what inclusion for Indigenous people, what we would like that to be. So I'm very excited. And I'll put my email on here as well if you'd like to just become a part of the listserv for this region's coalition.
Thank you, Patricia. And for anyone who just missed it, Patricia has just joined the Coalition's Board of Directors, and we're really pleased to have her. We have 3 new members of our Board of Directors, and we're going to invite them to a future a future general membership meeting so that people can have a chance to get to know and hear from them a little bit more. Oh, Patricia, there's a request to you. Okay. So if you're interested in joining today's meeting, please email Patricia chiefseattleclub.org, and Patricia will send the team's info for today's meeting, which is a great agenda. I saw it. Thank you. Okay, everyone, thank you so much for joining. I know we're a little bit over. We'll try to make sure we have more time for member announcements. If you have member announcements that you'd like to share at our July 15th meeting, please send us a quick email so we make sure that we get you on the agenda and we plan for that. And we look forward to seeing you all soon, perhaps sooner than that. Nadia, yes, Nadia, please. Do you want to unmute yourself and make that announcement about public library openings? Hello, thank you.
Yes, hello. Sorry, my video is doing what it wants to do, but I just wanted to give you all a heads up that locations, Seattle Public Library locations are reopening to in-building services. So right now, Beacon Hill, Ballard, the Broadview Branch, Douglas Truth, Lake City, Rainier Beach, and Southwest are open for limited services, including computer printing, charging stations, bathrooms, and coming up soon here next week, we'll be opening additional libraries, including the downtown library. So I just dropped a link in the chat so you all can get the updates about the hours and the services that will be offered, but we're really excited to welcome people back into the building. So please spread the word and invite people to come back to their library.
That's tremendous. A wonderful note to end on. Thank you so much. We'll be glad to work with you to help get that wonderful and important information out ASAP. Thank you so much, everybody.